We had a ton of things released just this morning and I need to get you caught up on it. First off, inflation coming in below expectations, especially if you use the special numbers that the Bank of Canada is actually looking at. And on top of that, we have profits released by some of the largest grocery chains in Canada, and frankly, people are pissed about it. So let's talk about this new inflation report and what it means for you, as well as the Bank of Canada's response and the hidden numbers that they're actually looking at, as well as how all that relates to why people are mad at Loblaws and Metro. Inflation being one of the biggest issues in Canada right now, especially in the eyes of the Bank of Canada, who are actively raising interest rates dramatically to try to attack this inflation. Well, we thought this month that inflation was actually going to go up a little bit because of gas prices. Last month, the September report said that compared to the previous September, gas prices were up 13.2%. Now, when we compare this month's data that we just got for October, we're seeing that gas prices compared to last October are up 17.8%. So that is an increase compared to last month. So everyone thought, hey, we're going to see inflation going up here, but we actually saw inflation stay the same as last month. Last month, it clocked in at 6.9% compared year over year. This month, clocking in at the same rate, 6.9%. But of course, this inflation tracker, the CPI Consumer Price Index, is made up of a bunch of different categories, and some of them went up dramatically and some of them went down dramatically, and all together is what's causing this sort of stagnation of inflation. Let me show you what I'm talking about here with this graph that shows all the different categories that are put into this and where they compare to last month. And it tells a pretty interesting story. Of course, we just talked about how transportation is the biggest gainer with gas prices going up, but there are a few categories that you might be surprised about actually going down on the average cost for these goods and services, right? We see food going down very marginally, but what's more interesting in my eyes is that recreation, education, and reading, this category is what's gone down most dramatically. This kind of makes sense, and it's right along the lines of what the Bank of Canada is trying to do. They're raising interest rates to make people feel less wealthy, right? Investment portfolios tend to go down. The cost of servicing debt tends to go up, so people spend less money on recreational things. And it also is indicative of our rather negative economy right now, that we're seeing also alcoholic beverages, tobacco products, and recreational cannabis go up in price, meaning going up in demand. Now, taking a look at this inflation data is super important for the Bank of Canada because it's going to influence their next decisions on whether or not they increase interest rates, keep them the same, or even pivot and start to lower them. But did you know that the Bank of Canada actually isn't looking at the same CPI data we are? Or at the very least, they're taking this CPI data and altering it before they look at it and actually consider what that means for the economy. Let me explain. I was just telling you about how the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, is made up of a big basket of different categories, right? Well, the Bank of Canada likes to eliminate some of those categories before they look at the data. They like to look at something called the core CPI, which removes certain categories that they think are too volatile to give us a good representation of where things are at with inflation in a more general sense. And you can see that here with this chart, right? We were already looking at the normal inflation rate, 6.9% to 6.9%, but the Bank of Canada is going to be more drastically looking at the CPI excluding food and energy, saying that food and energy costs are too volatile, go up and down too quickly for them to use that in their data. Some people say that's just a convenient way that they can look at inflation data that looks less negative, but that is a conversation for another day. You can see here compared to September, 5.4% core inflation, or rather CPI excluding food and energy, and this month 5.3. So we're seeing inflation tick down a little bit when you don't consider energy and food costs. And the data that the Bank of Canada sees, as well as what other central banks see around the world, has a big impact for you because the decisions they make going forward, whether or not to raise interest rates or to keep them the same or to make them go down, that impacts things like jobs, investment values, how much you are likely to get paid in the future. All of this is impacted by which direction the Bank of Canada is looking to go. Now, because they're going to be looking more at this core data, the CPI excluding food and energy, and they're starting to see that tick down a bit, that could be a sign to them that, hey, maybe what we're doing here with raising interest rates is starting to work. We're starting to see inflation tick down a little bit. But a lot of people will debate whether or not what the Bank of Canada is doing, raising interest rates over the past 6 to 8 months, is even showing up in this data yet, because the Bank of Canada itself even recognizes that, hey, we know that these interest rate hikes have a lagging effect on the economy, meaning we make the change and the effect comes down the road. Based on that, it's looking like the Bank of Canada, likely in December when they make their next decision, will probably raise rates either 1/4% or 1/2%, having rather large impacts on real estate for sure, because the cost of getting a mortgage is going to go up at the next meeting unless they pivot completely outside of expectations. And now to get into this grocery store drama, because oddly enough, it is related to all of the inflation numbers we were just talking about. And the Bank of Canada even has some words that apply directly to this situation. But first, some context. Last month, Galen Weston, heir of the Weston fortune, well, he put out a letter that was not very well received by many Canadians, especially given this hit them directly in their inboxes. He calls it a price freeze for inflation, kind of trying to look good amidst the bad press that the grocery chains have been getting as of late. He talks about how much grocery prices have gone up, almost 15% in 2 years and more for other items. But he says, hey, this isn't our fault. It's out of our control. Your grocery bill is higher because the suppliers who make the products are raising their prices for us, for the grocery store. And we've got to pass that on to you. And they're doing their best to make sure there aren't any unfair price increases. But they say most of these price increases are reasonable. There's nothing we can really do about it. Then Loblaws and Weston, setting themselves up as the savior here, say, but need not worry, we're focusing on what is in our control, and we're freezing the prices of all no-name products, more than 1,500 grocery essentials sold in our stores across the country until January 31st, 2023. We're not going to raise the prices of no-name brand specific items. Now on Twitter, Jagmeet Singh took credit for this price freeze, saying Big Grocery has made $2.3 billion in profits this year. 23.6% of Canadians have had to cut back on buying food. And today, on the very day that we vote to investigate greedflation, the term that they've coined for saying that inflation isn't coming from monetary policy, it's coming from corporations who are jacking prices up unreasonably. He says Loblaws announces a price freeze on no-name products. Well, we take the credit here. The pressure is working. We're doing something for Canadians. But many people were a little bit skeptical of this and saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't be taking credit for this because it's not all that much of a positive in a lot of people's eyes. Many people saw Galen's letter as, well, just a marketing ploy saying, hey, we're going to keep on raising prices on the things that aren't our brand, but don't worry, we are going to freeze the prices for the next 3 months as long as you buy our specific products. Saying that this letter, again, is just like a marketing scheme to get more people to come to Loblaws or No Frills or PC or any of these other sort of all owned by the same people grocery store chains. And people have reason to be skeptical of these chains, especially given the 2017 incident where Loblaws and a number of other grocery store chains all colluded to keep bread prices at the exact same fixed price so that they could make more profit instead of actively competing on the open market. This is something that they've admitted to, and they had to offer free groceries or gift cards out to people as payback for this bread fixing scheme. But just this morning, some of the largest grocery chains released their earnings for Q3. That's July, August, and September of this year. And when people took a closer look at them, they said, hey, this directly contradicts what was in your letter, Galen. In this slide that shows some data from the earnings report for Loblaws, you can see that sales rose 8.3%, and they had better than expected revenue growth in the third quarter due to inflation. So inflation's helping out their revenue growth. Food retail basket size decreased while traffic inside its stores decreased, meaning people are buying less per visit, but they're going to the store more frequently, as well as this Outlook section, which maybe I'm blocking a little bit, but it says full year adjusted EPS growth in the high teens. EPS is earnings per share, essentially how much the company earned divided by the amount of shares that the company has outstanding. And they said that this growth in earnings per share is in the high teens, so like 17 to 19% likely. And this is from the Metro earnings report that was released today as well. And they said sales in the fourth quarter of fiscal 2022 remained strong, reaching $4.432 million. So that's $4.432 billion, up 8.3% from the fourth quarter of 2021, mainly due to, again, here's the trend, higher inflation this quarter. Now, of course, this frustrated people because in Galen's letter, he said, hey, we're just passing on the costs to the consumers that are being passed along to us because it costs more to transport things, it costs more to grow things, it costs more to process things. It's not our fault, it's the people that we're buying the food for, which is why people were surprised when they saw the increased revenues in this report. Although Metro at the very least say that our diversified business model allowed us to maintain stable gross margins while delivering good value to our customers, as reflected in overall tonnage growth and market share gains in the quarter. So this is an argument saying that, hey, our margins haven't gone up, or the amount that we make on each item on average haven't gone up. It's actually just that we're getting more market share, where more people are coming to our business rather than other people's business, and that's why we're seeing increased revenue. At least that's what this grocery store chain is saying. But in recent testimony given by Tiff Macklem in front of the Senate of Canada, he said that they're scared of something that these corporations, big corporations in Canada, including Loblaws and Metro, could do if the Bank of Canada doesn't get inflation under control quickly.
We have seen some danger signs in the economy, and here's where I'm going to turn it over to Senior Deputy Governor Rogers. The danger signs we've seen is that companies have very rapidly passed through higher prices to consumers, and as consumers kind of get used to high inflation, they accept those. So then companies, when they raise prices, they're not worrying about what their competitor is going to do. We need to get back to a situation where companies are more worried that they're going to lose their customers if they raise their prices. But when you've got an economy in excess demand, if you're a company and you can deliver the product, then you may be able to, it's easier to pass through those prices. But
so the Bank of Canada is saying that if consumers get used to inflation being around for the long term, these big corporations can just raise their prices and not be worried about losing their customers, right? This is an argument for more competition in Canada, which is a larger discussion than one we're going to have in this video when you look at the telecoms companies and the grocery store companies in this country, alongside a number of other industries that are propped up by the government. But like I said, that's a conversation for another day, but I'm curious what you think about the one that we just had. What do you think about this latest inflation data staying the same, or if you're looking at it like the Bank of Canada, slightly ticking down, as well as these grocery store earnings? Do you believe that Jagmeet Singh's idea of greedflation is the main cause of this inflationary problem, the cost of living crisis? Or do you think that it's more directly related to monetary policy, the Bank of Canada, and potentially spending from the federal government that's caused so much inflation? Lots of different views on it. Let me know down below what you think about it. I read every single one, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. I'm constantly bringing these Canadian focused updates, and I think there's not enough of them out there. So if you want to encourage me to keep on going, click that button for free, and it really helps out the channel. But with all that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. Really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.